Start this week. I guess the resolution was actually for the 16th, so their shifts have been changed, and this week is their official starting time, so all that stuff is in place. The other thing, real quick, we put our tablets in service about a month ago. These are on both chief cars and then our frontline apparatus. What this does is allows us to initiate our EMS reports on here, get our signatures for refusal, so it takes all the paper stuff out of the loop. It gives us access to our database for occupancy information, contact information, and all sorts of things. So it's a great tool for us to have. So if you should see us walking around with these little tablets, it's our connection point to everything.
So you're using those to process all of your paperwork for a call, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Helps with revenue as well.
We can actually complete a report in the field now if we wanted to, but a lot of times they'll get it started and then they can come back and type the rest of it on the computer at the station.
Okay.
But this takes a lot of the issues with having signatures and paper, or patient information on a piece of paper and having to scan it.
Okay.
So it gets rid of that, so they've been a really great tool. The only other thing I have, and I just wanted to share this with you because it's actually interesting. An old friend of ours that retired from the Blue Ash Fire Department called me the other day, and he had some ledgers and some old photos that were from the old Sycamore Township Volunteer Fire Company and the Blue Ash Volunteer Fire Company going back to the 40s, 50s, 60s. And some of the photos actually have an old Ross Moyne with a Sycamore Township fire engine. And then I guess it was the old township maintenance building that was in Blue Ash,
Yes.
I think. But, and some other pictures of some fires with the old firefighters and so just a little fun fact. It'll be interesting to dig through some of the ledgers because they're actually the minutes from all their meetings that they had and to see how things went. So if you follow our website or our Facebook page, once I kind of learn some more and do some research, I'll try to share those a little bit at a time.
It might be good to put some of those pictures up there.
Yeah, it was just really neat. We have never really gotten to find a lot of information from that era back then. I've only had one photo of the fire engine with some guys, and that's it. So, yeah, just a neat little thing to share with everybody, but that's all I have, so thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
Good, how many of those do you have?
We have 7 right now. Both engines, all 3 medic units, and then my car and the chief's car. So they were very affordable for us, and that helped out too. So it's a great tool for us to have.
Okay. Any questions? Sheriff update?
There's nothing to report, sir.
Nothing to report. All right. Any questions on that? Nothing to report. Any questions? Mr. Bickford, Community Reinvestment Act.
I'm gonna go over here and do this. We've been approached by Hamilton County Development Corporation, which is the economic development arm of Hamilton County, for the creation of a community reinvestment area for the properties bounded by Kenwood, Happiness, and Port of Frolic. And as soon as this comes up here, talk a little bit about what a CRA is and our role in the CRA. Unfortunately, townships cannot create a CRA. It has to be created by the county, so the request always comes through Hamilton County, which is HEDC through us. And then you all in turn pass legislation and send off to Hamilton County, who then in turn sends it off to the state for potential creation of an area. So a CRA is an economic development tool, and the crux of it provides real property tax exemptions for renovations and new construction. It's real property only. It is not personal or inventory, so, and you've heard of tangible personal property tax and whatnot, that is not, part of this. It's for commercial and residential, it's only for new construction and remodeling, it's for the property owner only, so a tenant, of a structure cannot apply for this type of exemption. The baseline taxes continue as is, so in our case, the area requested for the CRA would still push the, taxes today through, which is about $14,000 for us. And then the abated revenue is used for public infrastructure. Now, it's, for townships, the request must be processed by the county, as I mentioned, city, villages, et cetera. They can just enable their own legislation and send it off to the state. The ultimate approval of a CRA or an area is ultimately done by the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services. A basic CRA is up to 50% abatement for 15 years with no school agreement, and it can go up to 100%, 15 years, not years, with a school agreement. The minimum limits for construction are on residential remodeling, 2 units or less is $2,500, and commercial industrial remodeling is $5,000 minimum for new construction. Multifamily is considered commercial. It is not considered residential. The only residential would be a duplex, single-family attached, or a single-family home. So this request was initiated by the county, Hamilton County Development Corporation. Obviously, the property owners came to them to start the request. The county will complete the required surveys and information. The information packet has to be completed. There's a housing survey, there is an employment survey, there's a whole bunch of background information that has to be done and sent out to the state. The local government, which is us, provides supporting legislation and then controls any district incentives. So for example, the whole point of the CRA is to facilitate economic development for the future. And your district or area does not necessarily have to be the properties that are being developed. It can be a broader area to allow benefits to bleed off from any type of development. So your job is to say, county, if you want to approve this CRA, here's what we recommend you do. The CRA remains in effect for the duration of the timeframes, and it starts on project construction, not district creation. So for example, you may say, you know, we have an area we want to put into a CRA, and we're going to put this in place. The time does not start to run until construction starts on the project. And then finally, the county would petition Ohio Development Services to move forward with the project. You can also say, no, we're not going to push it forward. And then finally, it's about a 10-week process. From the stage we're at today, it'll be about 10 weeks until there's some type of action taken. And finally, approval is by the Ohio Department of Development Services. So, the request from HCDC is the area highlighted here in that kind of red. So it is the properties in question of the proposed development, as well as one single-family home. That is the minimum requirement. So as I was discussing this with HCDC, my thought was, well, what could we do to provide a benefit for the surrounding properties that are going to be next to this development? And here's two potential alternatives that you could consider and could have be your district that's formed. You have the properties in question, obviously, but then you look at the single family that would surround this. And there's two alternatives here. You have Dunedin as well as Frolic. You could put those particular properties in the area as well, and they would receive the same benefit that you could find in your area. So for example, you see it there, Dan?
Okay.
For example, the baseline CRA would say that any new residential remodel can receive an abatement. So if someone decides they want to finish off their basement, or they want to remodel their kitchen, or do something on the interior of the house, they are eligible to apply for an exemption on new taxes for that improvement. So it gives them some type of incentive to construct that improvement.
Would an addition be
In
included
addition,
in that?
so an addition would be considered new construction. So you could extend that benefit to new construction as well, as a part of this. You're not bound by the project that's driving the CRA. You can expand it. And another thing you could do is, you could say inside of this CRA, the only way that the benefit of the CRA takes place is if properties that aren't slated for commercial development currently must stay residential during the term of this particular abatement. So for example, you could say the properties on Frolic, if you're part of the CRA, you cannot convert to commercial while the project is continuing. So you have options on setting up the area and looking for its economic development terms. So, that being said, just to give you some history, CRAs are, about half the county uses CRAs, and they use them for different purposes. For example, there's some in Sims Township down in Camp Dennison, I believe it is, where they have certain incentives for developing properties. There's one out in, there's Columbia Township, Newtown has one, City of Cincinnati has those all over the place. So, they're not uncommon in Sycamore Township, or to Hamilton County, just getting right here. So there are 9 currently in the unincorporated areas that HCDC has pushed through. The most recent one is in Anderson Township, it's Anderson Township CRA1. It's in the area of their Anderson Town Center, which is their government complex and the surrounding property. They put a project in place to exempt taxes on construction of that particular area. If you know, out there, they've been trying to develop that for years, and it's never quite gotten off the ground because it's never been economically feasible. So they put this in place about 3 years ago, and they just recently modified it. So those are the unincorporated areas that have CRAs. So, all that being said, obviously, the board has approved the capital development 2-1. So, if the board decides to move forward with this type of CRA in the area, from a staff level, this is my recommendation to you, how you push this forward. So the abated revenue is being used for public infrastructure to facilitate economic development. It has to go back into the project. So this isn't a way for someone to pocket money on not paying taxes. It has to go back into it. Without a school agreement, meaning if the county and state decide to approve this, it's a 50% real property tax abatement for a maximum of 15 years, which includes multifamily. You have the ability to extend abatement up to 100% for 15 years if a school district agreement is provided and pilot payments are made. And then also, if required by the ORC, agreement with the JDS, which would be Great Oaks. So if you are interested in doing this, our recommendation is, if you want to allow the 100% abatement for 15 years, there must be a school district agreement attached to it. Otherwise, that kind of defeats the purpose of the economic development.
Define pilot payments, please.
Payment in lieu of taxes. So there would be a separate agreement that the property owners of the commercial portion of development would in turn pay into the school district in terms of pilot. So the school would receive payments as if it were being made whole on the development, much like a TIF.
Okay, you said there's 50% up there real property, but before you said it could be up to 100%.
Correct. If the school district has an agreement with the applicant, then it can go up to 100%. If there are no agreements and the CRA is put into place, the maximum abatement is 50% for 15 years. If there is an agreement, then the maximum abatement is 100% for those 15 years. So you have to have an agreement with the school district. And it's project specific. So for example, in this particular case, let's say you're gonna build 4 different buildings. In our case, we have multifamily, we have an office building, we have a hotel. Each construction has to be applied for separately. So the district exists, allowing for this exemption. But let's say they come in and build the apartments, and they apply for the CRA. That is one way to do it. And the taxes from the particular construction of those apartments would go through the CRA process. The other 2 developments then would have to be applied for separately, and they don't have to be applied for. So if the apartments are built, the CRA is the exemption is applied for on the apartments, then the hotel and the office come in, they don't necessarily have to be applied for a CRA. Those taxes may flow through as normal. Second thing, if you're considering this, an agreement on revenue sharing with the local school district is required, the beneficiary is required to make any revenue sharing payments. There are certain portions of the CRA that require revenue sharing on income tax payrolls over $1 million in new payroll, which this would potentially be a part of. So we have our revenue projections, but based on the CRA language and the allotment in the CRA, any type of revenue enhancement based off of an income tax would have to be shared with the school district at a certain percentage based on the new payroll. So if you're gonna do this, the whole point for doing this is to facilitate economic development, is to facilitate revenue back to Sycamore Township, and you need to make sure that our revenue stream is protected as well. The application for commercial abatement must be applied for before the project begins construction. That is a requirement of the CRA. If they receive a building permit and put shovels in the ground to start construction, and the specific application has not been applied for in the district, then the state will not approve that specific application. The applicant has to build a minimum of 200 apartments, minimum of 100,000 square feet of office, and construction of a minimum of 120 key hotel, along with 20,000 square feet of retail and/or restaurant spaces. The reason for this is, your economic model for this development is conditioned upon building that. If they don't build that, you don't get the revenue that is anticipated, and then you're gonna lose even more on a CRA. So, the developer has to agree to certain standards in order to be granted a CRA. And then finally, you have to have the joint economic development district created. Last two, any single-family property in the CRA must remain single-family use for the life of this agreement. Residential remodel projects will receive 50% abatement for 10 years, and new residential construction will receive 50% abatement for 15 years. You can increase this to 100% if the school district agrees. If the school district decides not to agree, then the terms of the 50% over the time period will apply based on the type of improvements to the property. And then finally, like anything, there are always fees, councils, review boards that have to be set up to go along with this, and that would all have to be paid by the district and not be paid for by the township. Again, if you want the county to move forward, we need to pass legislation. If you want us to create legislation, Mr. Miller and I are happy to do that, but I wanted to lay out what the request is for the CRA. And then finally, just on the site, take you back to this, why we are doing this, what the potential outcome is for this development. As you know, the site was approved on a 2-to-1 vote. They have their office, their retail, their hotel. We have our jet income broken down. Again, the final income hit to the township, or not hit, but income to the township is approximately $400,000. And that's kind of what this project is looking to generate for us. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're inclined to offer a CRA, you have to look at what our return on this particular investment is. And you have to decide, is this a worthwhile investment for us based on our return?
And that $400,000 is in addition to the $14,700 we currently collect in property taxes, correct?
That's
Okay,
correct.
that
Any
included.
property tax on the site currently will continue to pass through to their existing entities, so the school district's gonna get, continue to get their share of it, and then obviously the township will continue to get our share of it.
And then after 15 years.
It's done, it goes
It'll
away,
be taxed at full rate.
and then everything
Property
goes,
tax.
correct, properties then are taxed at full rate, and then the revenue would flow to wherever it's gonna go. It'd be a distribution between the county, the township, and then the schools. In this particular case, the schools get about 69% of all tax revenue. On property taxes, Deer Park City Schools, Sycamore Township, about 69% go to the schools, 3%, 4% to the township, and then the rest goes to the county. And
And
what people,
one comment, this, you're talking $400,000. We get from one building, Redstone, one building, we get around $375,000.
How do you know we do that? How we
I
get
know
that?
that's what Mr. Bicker and I talked about over a year ago.
yeah, well, that's out of that,
So, you
An
know,
estimate.
That's out of that, that's an estimate, that's out of that JDZ district, but we really don't know what we get out of that
Not
building
exact, that's
because.
the penny, but he said it rounded off to that figure.
yeah, that's a complete estimate, I guess. It could go up and down, and the thing about Z, income goes up and down yearly, so, you know, you may get 500,000 one year off of the building, and then 100,000 the next year. Because the way the system is set up in the tax laws, we don't have access to the individual taxpayers. So
Because
I can't give you a guarantee of what it's gonna be. I can only estimate based on what's in the district.
Well, just like this is just estimate too. This
That's
is-
correct.
We're talking estimates, so.
That's correct.
And can you go back a slide? There was a statement about the abatement of revenue. I'm assuming that's the abatement of property tax. Second line.
Well, so abated revenue is when someone doesn't have to pay an expense, it's obviously considered revenue. So this particular group is going to get revenue based off of not paying taxes, right? So instead of paying $1,000, they're gonna have $1,000 less to pay. That's $1,000 they can invest in something. So you could call it abated property tax revenue, it is what it is. Whatever comes off of that site from the abatement for the property taxes must be reinvested back into the site. It can't be pocketed as revenue.
So they have to use it on the project, is all it's
That's
saying?
correct. They have to use it for public infrastructure to facilitate economic development on the site. Whether that's off-site improvements, on-site improvements, whatever is under the definition of public infrastructure.
And is there another slide that estimates the dollar amount of abatement?
I do not have that particular slide here. No, I did not calculate that.
And how much does a CRA cost? Is
Cost
there,
us zero.
there's no going rate?
A CRA is not a going rate, it's a property tax abatement. Property taxes are based on the value of the building at the time of construction, and then based on real estate appraisal by the county auditor. We have a good indication of what we think property values will be worth. Typically, you're looking at office buildings anywhere from $125 to $200 a square foot. You're looking at retail. Retail's kind of a different animal, usually about $100 a square foot. Again, that's dependent on economy, time of year, and who does the appraisal.
So is HCDC gonna come and make a formal presentation?
If the board so is inclined, but they normally don't. They are just the arm that has to move it forward.
I have a question. Greg, why did HCDC come to Sycamore Township? Did someone approach them and ask them?
Correct,
To
as I
do
mentioned
this,
earlier.
who was that?
developer of ACDC,
Who was that?
redeveloper of property. That'd be the guy sitting
Capital
right-
investment?
That'd be the guy sitting to your right.
Capital investment.
The guy sitting to your right, that's correct.
All right.
Greg, can you go back to the maps? I'd asked Greg to contact HCDC because I wanted to try to figure out how we might be able to include more parcels in this CRA without upsetting the formula in some way. And I'm partial to the third one, which is on the far right. I think this protects the neighbors against future commercial expansion, number one. And number two, I think it provides benefits to the residents that are in proximity of the development. There's really no downside to being in this CRA. There's only really an upside, and that is if you're gonna do improvements to your home, you reap the benefit of a tax abatement. So if you wanna, as Greg said, put an addition on the back, or if they were to do a tear down and put a new house up, then it would